Hello everybody, welcome back to this series where we will be discussing and analyzing part 2 of the Phantom Menace. If this is the first video you're watching from this channel, I suggest you go watch part 1 of this series so you can get caught up. We left off where Anakin gets ecstatic about showing Padme a droid he's building. As you can see, it's a protocol droid, but not just any protocol droid, but the one and only C-3PO. George Lucas had Anakin be 3PO's father because he thought it would be an amusing irony while also giving the opportunity for 3PO to meet R2 for the first time and start what will ultimately become a very long, arduous friendship. Anakin creating 3PO is ironic because when we see 3PO in the original trilogy, he becomes an inverse of Darth Vader, in that Darth Vader is a robotic human, while 3PO is a very human-like robot. In addition, Darth Vader is very dark in nature, while 3PO is very light in nature. We cut to the ship, where we see a Naboo diplomat named C.O. Bibble explaining the situation to the Queen, saying that the death toll is catastrophic. But Obi-Wan believes it's a trick and tells them to not reply. He contacts Qui-Gon, and he agrees with Obi-Wan and states that regardless if it's true or not, they're running out of time. We get our first look at Coruscant, just a little teaser though of what it really looks like. Beautiful shot of it right here. You can tell that it's a city planet just by the shot alone. This is where we see Darth Maul speak for the first time, as the viewer can infer that he found the ship, as he states that Tatooine is sparsely populated. If the trace was correct, I will find them quickly, Master. Sidious replies saying, move against the Jedi first. This shows that the plan is to eliminate any obstacle standing in their way so that they can force the Queen to sign the treaty that would allow the Trade Federation to take full control over the planet. Then Maul infamously says, at last we will reveal ourselves to the Jedi. At last we will have revenge. This shows us that the Sith haven't been around for a long time, and that they've been planning a scheme to get revenge, and that scheme turns out to be successful by the end of the trilogy. We cut to Anakin's home, where we see them at a table eating, and the topic of discussion we first see here is slavery. Shmi informs them that all slaves have a transmitter placed inside their bodies somewhere. Anakin chimes in and tells them that if you try to escape, you'll be blown up. Now, I'm not sure if he was exaggerating or if it just means they capture them and kill them, but I'm sure Watto turned it off somehow once he freed him. Anyway, Padme is baffled by the fact that there's still slavery in the galaxy, but Shmi states that the Republic doesn't exist out here, and that they must survive on their own, which implies that Tatooine and even other planets in the Outer Rim have their own self-government and own way of life. Anakin brings up pod racing and states that he is the only human who can do it. Qui-Gon replies saying that he must have Jedi reflexes if he's able to race pods. Then Jar Jar tries to grab what looks to be an apple. What's funny about this is him grabbing Jar Jar's tongue is showcasing the type of reflexes he's talking about when he mentions Jedi reflexes to Anakin. It's definitely a scene that can blow past you, but if you stop to think about it, it makes sense. Anakin then asks if he's a Jedi Knight and points out the fact that he saw his lightsaber, which he calls a laser sword. I think Lucas had him say that to acknowledge the fact that not everyone really knows much about the Jedi. They know they exist, but that doesn't automatically mean they know everything. We can infer that Anakin has a lack of knowledge of the Jedi and even the Force, which depicts that the Jedi and their way of life is really sacred and kept to themselves. Qui-Gon tries to fool Anakin by suggesting the fact that he may have killed the Jedi, but Anakin doesn't take the bait and says that no one can kill a Jedi, which foreshadows Qui-Gon's death. Anakin then talks about his dream of being a Jedi and coming back and freeing all the slaves. Was this a premonition? Leave a comment down below and tell me what you think. Then Anakin asks if he came to free slaves. Qui-Gon replies no, but Anakin wants to believe he is and asks why else would he be here, which then makes Qui-Gon feel obligated to explain why and tells them their situation. Padme wonders if the junk dealers have weakness. Shmi answers by saying gambling and how everything revolves around betting on the pod races, which gives Qui-Gon an idea when he says greed can be a powerful ally. Anakin starts to suggest that he can enter his pod and help them out, but Shmi stops him and tells him no, as she is worried for her son because of how dangerous it is. But Anakin reminds his mother of the time she told him that the biggest problem in this universe is that nobody helps each other, which shows how selfless he is and his willingness to want to help their situation. She gives in and tells him that there is no other way to get them out of their situation, and even though she doesn't like it, she knows that her son can help them. Padme expresses her feelings on the matter as she doubts that Anakin can really help them, since he's just a boy. In addition, she notes that this is something the Queen would not approve, which means she doesn't approve, since she's actually the Queen in secret. But Qui-Gon ignores her and moves on with the plan. Qui-Gon enters into Watto's shop, and Watto complains about him wanting to sponsor Anakin in the race, and is curious as to how he's going to pay. Qui-Gon tells him that the ship will be the entry fee. Watto wonders what Anakin would ride since he smashed up his pod in the last race, but Anakin tries to explain what happened, in which he suggests Sebulba cheated and that it wasn't his fault, which foreshadows what we will see happen in this pod race. Qui-Gon lies and says he's acquired a pod in a game of chance, and he and Watto exchange how they'll split the winnings. Qui-Gon makes the negotiation possible by having Watto front the cash for the entry fee, and if Anakin wins, Watto keeps the winnings minus the cost of the parts they need, and if Anakin loses, Watto keeps the ship. Either way, Watto wins. Qui-Gon then looks at Anakin, showing confidence in him, and Anakin looks back at him in acknowledgement, smiling at the fact that Qui-Gon was able to make the deal. When Qui-Gon walks away, Watto calls him a fool. We cut to the ship, and Qui-Gon tells Obi-Wan what we saw between him and Watto. Obi-Wan questions him on what would they do if the plan fails, but Qui-Gon basically says they have no other choice. And before he hangs up, he mentions Anakin, suggesting that there's something special about him. Shmi comes in, and Qui-Gon says that she should be very proud of her son as he gives kudos to him and his selflessness. Shmi adds that he knows nothing of greed, which makes me question, when did he? Did the Jedi introduce him to greed by harping on the fact that he's the chosen one, or was it Palpatine's manipulation? I think as we go on, we'll be able to discover the answer layer by layer. Qui-Gon notes that Anakin has special powers and can see things before they happen, and tells her that the Force is strong with him, and if he had been born in the Republic, they would have taken him and be trained in the Academy. Qui-Gon asks Shmi who's Anakin's father, and she replies, there was no father. Now this part is definitely taken from the Bible and the birth of Jesus. Some people try to criticize it and look at it as a negative, but I don't understand why. Star Wars and its mythos is taken from all sorts of religions and all sorts of myths. The Jedi were created based off the Buddhist monks. The Force and the idea of balance is based on Taoism, and now there's Christian element to it with the birth of Anakin. This birth also revolves around Joseph Campbell's hero's journey, where the first part of his journey is having an unnatural birth. Star Wars overall is about Anakin's redemption into fulfilling the prophecy of bringing balance to the Force by destroying the Sith. This is where it starts, his journey into becoming a hero. So yeah, this part doesn't really deserve any criticism, as it makes sense and is further explained later on in the movie, and it falls in line with the Star Wars mythos. We see the kids surround the pod that Anakin is working on and tells them that he's entering the race. They make fun of the pod and belittle him as they laugh and say that he's going to be crushed and not have a chance of winning while they leave the scene. Anakin warns Jar Jar to keep away from the energy beam, and what does he do? He gets his mouth caught in the beam and his tongue goes numb. Jar Jar tries to find the wrench and gets his hand stuck in one of the engines. 3PO watches it happen and notes that he's a little odd, and right before Anakin starts the racer, everyone leaves Jar Jar while he's still stuck to the engine except Padme. This highlights Padme's compassion and eagerness to help others, even if they're a bit silly and a bit of an outcast. We see Anakin start up the pod and is enthusiastic about the fact that he was able to get it to work. Shmi looks over him, pleased with his enthusiasm, but is also worried about his future based on the conversation she had with Qui-Gon. We see Qui-Gon and Anakin have a moment as Anakin looks up at the stars and is curious about them and wants to see all of them. This correlates with Luke's story and his aspirations to find purpose and adventure outside of Tatooine. While Anakin is looking up, Qui-Gon pokes him to get a blood sample and tells Anakin that he's checking for infections, but when he contacts Obi-Wan, he asks for a midichlorian count, which is what it really was about. Obi-Wan takes the sample and reads the chart, and it shows that his midichlorian count is over 20,000, more than Yoda. Qui-Gon then adds no Jedi has ever reached that level and is unsure what it all means. This implies that Anakin's potential as a Force user is extremely high, higher than any Jedi. However, with this power can be used for good and protect people from evil, or it can be used to destroy and oppress the masses. Now, I know there's some controversy over the concept of the midichlorians, but I'll explain why it's necessary and doesn't hurt the fantasy/mythological aspects of Star Wars when we get to the part where Qui-Gon explains what they are. Before the transition into the next scene, we see that Shmi was eavesdropping in on their conversation. We see the wipe transition into Darth Maul's ship called the Sith Infiltrator entering Tatooine. As Maul gets out of the ship, we hear those lyrics again. This is a subliminal reminder that danger is looming and a big fight is inevitable. He oversees the land and sends out probe droids to go hunt down the Jedi and the Queen. We get to the pod race event where everyone is setting everything up. Watto talks with Qui-Gon as he feels very confident that Anakin will lose and he'll get their ship. In addition, he states that he thinks Sebulba will win and that he's betting heavily on him to win. Qui-Gon says he'll take that bet, and he tries to bet the freedom of both Anakin and his mother on Anakin winning. But Watto says no pod is worth 2 slaves. Qui-Gon replies, "The boy then." Watto says, "We'll let fate decide," and pulls out a chance cube. Blue is Anakin and red is his mother. He rolls it on the floor. Qui-Gon uses the Force and it lands on blue. If Qui-Gon is confident that Anakin is the chosen one, why would he feel the need to use the Force in this scenario? I think ultimately Qui-Gon's deep compassion for Anakin got in the way. He used the Force out of his urge to help and train Anakin to be a Jedi, because he has now realized how special he really is. Anyway, Watto is upset that it lands on Anakin and basically tells Qui-Gon that nothing will happen because there's no way Anakin will win. Anakin and the rest of the crew arrive. R2 and 3PO discuss space travel as 3PO says, "Space travel sounds rather perilous. I can assure you they will never get me onto one of those dreadful starships." Which is ironic because he ends up going on so many space adventures. This boy right here on the right, his name is Kitster, and he exposes Anakin about the fact that he never finished a race. Padme is annoyed by this as Qui-Gon comes over, not bothered by this at all, and Padme gives him a look like she can't believe that they are risking so much for him. We cut to the probe droid seeking out the Jedi. And now the big event, the pod race. Fun fact, this shot right here is filmed over a miniature of the pod race event. From my understanding, there is no CGI in this shot, all miniature models. Pretty amazing how Lucas still stuck to basic techniques and gave us a pretty iconic shot for this movie. We got two-headed announcers. Their names are Fode and Bede. I love their voices. It's like you're watching a real sporting event. I just really love the creativity and imagination of this movie. They mentioned Sebulba as the reigning champion. As you can see, he's showboating and soaking in all the attention. They introduce other racers, and we see these little helper droids called the pit droids being silly. Anakin gets announced and he waves to the crowd. His mom comes over to give him support. Here's the foreshadowing of Sebulba cheating coming into play as he breaks a piece of Anakin's pod. He walks over to Anakin and they have a little banter with each other before the race. You can say in this scene, Anakin gets his first lesson from Qui-Gon, which is to concentrate on the moment and trust your instincts. We get our first look at Jabba the Hutt, who seems to be like a royal figure of Tatooine. Padme addresses her frustration, saying, "You Jedi are far too reckless." And Qui-Gon replies, "The Queen trusts my judgment, young handmaiden. You should too." Padme didn't like that and says, "You assume too much." I wonder if Qui-Gon knows she is the Queen, and if he's just kind of toying with her a little bit. I don't know, but that's just kind of the vibe I'm getting at when I watch this scene. They start their engines. According to Ben Burt, who's responsible for the sound effects of the Star Wars movies, each of the vehicles' sounds have their own personality. Pod sound can be powerful, angry, comical, smooth, cool, hip, old-fashioned, goofy, or dangerous. In addition, the sounds were made from race cars, boats, warbirds, electric toothbrushes, shavers, motorcycles, rockets, and helicopters. We see some spectators, and on Watto's left we see the actor who plays the Ewok Wicket in Return of the Jedi, and he also is well known for his role in Willow. The race begins, everyone goes, but Anakin gets stuck as his racer dies on him and looks for a way to get out of this situation. And once he figures it out, he immediately takes off. You can see how fast his ship is as he's able to catch up pretty quickly. Here we have Aurra Sing making her first appearance in the Star Wars universe and would later be in the Clone Wars TV show. Here I wanted to talk a little bit about filmography. One of the people here who considers himself one of the people here on YouTube who considers himself a film critic has criticized about the fact that a lot of the shots panel from left to right during this pod racing sequence. However, he is wrong to criticize that because that is basic filmmaking and basic filmography called the 180-degree rule. To put it simply, if you were to film a person driving from home to work, you would put the camera on the side to show the car moving from his home, from his home, which would be on the left side, to work, which would be panning towards the right. To show the opposite of him coming from work to home, you would put it on the other side to show that he's leaving from work, right to left. If the camera were to be on the other side of the pod race, like he suggests, then it would show them reversing back, which would confuse the audience. This just tells you that not everything people say, including so-called experts, is correct. And FYI, these mainstream film critics on YouTube, like Red Letter Media, Chris Stuckman, and Jeremy Johns, are not expert film critics. They are people who know very little about film and the history of film and filmmaking. All they do is give their opinions on mainstream movies. That doesn't make you an expert. If you generally want to gain your knowledge on film and judge a movie objectively, watch people who really know their stuff and discuss film history and techniques. They know more about film than any of these mainstream YouTube film critics. But also understand that art is, for the most part, subjective. And if you have valid reasons why you like the movie and why you think it's good, then that's all that really matters. Anyway, the Tusken Raiders show up and start shooting at the pods. I forgot to mention not only Anakin's pod had trouble, but also this alien right here. However, Anakin was able to figure it out, and this guy's still having trouble and is all alone. It gets worse for him as his pod racer flies everywhere and he's left with no pod at all. So Boba is in the lead as they start the second lap. I think this is pretty cool as they have an alien hand out food for sale during the race, like how it is at real sporting events. So Boba playing dirty and throws what looks to be a wrench at the alien behind him, and his pod crashes. This ends up leading to Anakin's pod detaching from itself and has Anakin spinning out of control. But he keeps his calm, takes out a magnet to reattach the pod, and is back on track. He catches up to Sebulba and flies off a ramp and takes the lead. We see Jawas. Sebulba starts closing in. You would notice that in this entire pod race sequence that there is no John Williams music playing until we get to here, where we see the part Sebulba broke before the race start to fidget around. You got to give credit to George Lucas and the sound designers for making this sequence very compelling and exciting. One of Anakin's engines catches fire, Sebulba regains the lead, but Anakin is able to figure it out and take control. They latch onto each other. The stakes start to really build up in this moment as they are reaching closer to the finish line, but Anakin comes out on the winning end as we see Sebulba crash. Everyone gathers around him and celebrates. Jabba apparently fell asleep during the race. Watto gets upset about the fact that he lost and claims that Qui-Gon swindled him. Qui-Gon replies, "Whenever you gamble, my friend, eventually you'll lose." Watto is reluctant to release Anakin, saying it wasn't a fair bet, but Qui-Gon threatens to involve the Hutts. And as you can see, behind Qui-Gon, there's the probe droid, which means it has spotted Qui-Gon, and now Maul knows where to find them. Watto concedes and lets Qui-Gon take him. They go back to the ship and give them all the essential parts they acquired from Watto. Qui-Gon tells Obi-Wan that he's going back. However, Obi-Wan replies, "Why do I sense we've picked up another pathetic life form?" Which shows his feelings on Anakin, and as he views him as someone who's inferior. In addition, the key word is another, so he puts Anakin and Jar Jar on the same level, which is a level beneath him. This depicts Obi-Wan's immaturity and lack of patience. Qui-Gon replies, "It's the boy who's responsible for getting us these parts." Qui-Gon is the true Jedi Master here, as he leads with compassion and views every being on the same level as him, and gives them the respect they deserve, unlike Obi-Wan. Qui-Gon comes back and frees Anakin, and tells him to come with him to become a Jedi. He gets excited and tells him that this is something that he's dreamed of doing, and turns around and asks his mom if he can go. But his mom reminds him that this is his choice alone. He doesn't need permission. He goes off to pack his things, but stops and asks if his mom is free too. Qui-Gon tells him that he tried, but Watto wouldn't have it. He walks over to his mom, sad about the fact that she's not free, and tells her that he doesn't want things to change. But she tells him that there's not much he can do, and tells him to go and pack. Qui-Gon comes up behind her and asks if she'll be okay, trying to be sympathetic. Anakin turns on 3PO while he's packing his things and tells him that he'll miss working on him, and that he'll make sure his mom doesn't sell him, and says goodbye. As they walk towards the ship, Anakin stops and looks back at his mom and runs towards her, struggling to let go and be away from his mom. He tells her that he'll come back and free her. She looks at him and tells him to be brave and to not look back. He turns around and walks away. His mom takes a deep breath as she watches him go, knowing what she did was a very difficult thing to do. This is a little bit of an emotional scene, kind of a coming-of-age part of the story, as Anakin is leaving this life for a new one, and that is something that we all either have or had to go through. For me, it was graduating high school and going off to college and live a life away from my parents. And anybody who's experienced that knows that feeling. And this is the type of feeling I get when watching this scene. It's very poetic and relatable. The probe droid comes back to Maul and tells him where they are and gets on his speeder. Anakin and Qui-Gon run, but Maul gets really close and Anakin has to drop. And we get our first lightsaber fight. In this fight, there's a lot of sand and dark robes that appear in front of the camera. You don't really see so much of the fight. This is intentional, and it was definitely the right decision, because you want the real confrontation to be really epic. This is just a teaser for what we are going to see at the end. In addition, it gives a more mysterious vibe to Maul and what he looks like and how he fights. Qui-Gon is able to escape, and we are left with a nice shot of Maul watching the ship leave. Obi-Wan and Anakin run up to Qui-Gon, and Obi-Wan asks, "What was it?" Qui-Gon answers, "I'm not sure, but it was well trained in the Jedi arts." This depicts that the Sith had been kept secret for a long time, and the Jedi had been unaware of it. Qui-Gon then suggests that they should be patient, and Obi-Wan and Anakin get properly introduced and head on off to Coruscant. We cut to a nice shot of Theed at nighttime. Viceroy Gunray and the Trade Federation have fully taken over Theed. Not quite the whole planet of Naboo, however, this is still significant as Theed is the main capital of Naboo that holds all the important political officials. Anyway, Gunray addresses that the people are held hostage and are starving. However, he tells C.O. Bibble that he'll be one of the first to die before the people. I think we don't see the people on the streets starving or people on the streets being abused because, one, this movie and Star Wars as a whole is primarily intended for kids that are around 12 years old, and showing them that would be too strong. Two, it might disrupt the pacing and overall tone of the movie because the movie is pretty lighthearted, so to show something extremely dark and depressing wouldn't really make sense and would throw the audience off kilter. The commander droid walks up to the Viceroy and tells him that they are searching for the underwater villages, which is where the Gungans live. This proves Obi-Wan's point from the beginning where he warned Boss Nass about how the Trade Federation will not only take over the surface but the Gungans and their homes as well. This increases the threat of the Trade Federation and raises the stakes of the plot. We cut to Padme in her handmaiden outfit and turns on the message from the Naboo diplomat, C.O. Bibble, that Obi-Wan and those who stayed on the ship saw, and looks very worried. She turns to Anakin and asks if he's okay, and he replies that he's cold. She walks over to him and covers him with a blanket, and gives Anakin a chance to give Padme a gift, which is the Japor snippet, to show his affection for her and hope she remembers him when they separate from each other. The dynamic here is that Anakin is in love with Padme, while Padme sees him almost like a little brother in this moment. She cares for him, but obviously not in the type of way Anakin cares about her. But when they meet again, and Anakin is much older, she progressively starts to fall in love with him romantically. They arrive at Coruscant, and we see a whole view of what the planet looks like. We get a look at Senator Palpatine as he's waiting for their ship to land. He welcomes them and is very polite and well-mannered, and introduces Chancellor Valorum. Valorum speaks and tells the Queen that people are concerned about the current situation, and tells her that he has called for a special session of the Senate to hear her position. Qui-Gon addresses to Valorum that he must speak with the Jedi Council and that the situation has become much more complicated. Anakin turns around as if he heard them and were talking about him, but it's pretty clear that it's insinuating that the Force called to him and made him react. They take the taxi and head out. We explore a little bit more of the environment of Coruscant, and if you are familiar with Metropolis, this planet is definitely inspired by that type of environment where the planet is one big city. They arrive in Palpatine's apartment to discuss the situation. Pay attention to the color of the room. As you can see, it is a vibrant red. Color plays an important part in all these films. According to George Lucas, red signifies evil. So, seeing that the whole room is red, it hints at the fact that Palpatine is Sidious, and that he is the ultimate bad guy. Things like this tell you the subtleties Lucas incorporates in the films, and to me, I think it's artistically brilliant, because when you discover these subtleties, it adds layers to the story and makes the story more insightful and interesting. Because it gives us a better idea of what message the story is really trying to say, and how the story reflects on our own life and our own society. Another thing I wanted to point out are the costumes of Queen Amidala and how exquisite they are, and how each of them take inspiration from other cultures. Really magnificent costume designs. People complain about the politics in the Star Wars prequels, but really it's one of its strengths, because it has us dive into how the galaxy operates and gives us explanations as to how the Republic turned into an empire. In this scene, we see Palpatine's manipulation begin. He starts to address the fact that the Chancellor has little real power, and that the bureaucrats are the ones who is really in charge. Amidala asks what options do they have, and he replies that their best option is to push for an election and replace Valorum with a stronger Chancellor. Amidala responds in opposition, saying that he's been their strongest supporter. The other choice Palpatine presents is that they submit a plea to the courts. However, Amidala refutes by saying that the courts will take even longer to decide things, and that the conflict needs to be solved quickly, since our people are suffering from the Trade Federation's control. Palpatine tries to be realistic and tells her that they must accept Federation control for now. But Amidala tells him that is something she can't do. This scene is very important because it outlines Palpatine's motive, which is to use this conflict to overthrow the Supreme Chancellor. This is Palpatine's first step into ruling the galaxy. That is the end of part 2 of The Phantom Menace. Part 3 is on its way. Please like and subscribe, and feel free to leave a comment. and may the Force be with you.